Buongiorno a tutti.
A good day to you all. Here we are at the second part of the lecture on technology and humanity. During the first part of the lecture, we addressed the relation between technology and humanity. We realized that it's quite a complex relation, and we came to the conclusions of the first part of the lecture presenting a set of post-human perspectives. Perspectives which inquire into these co-evolving entities of technology and humanity that are, or that we are, I don't know how to express it, that are emerging, taking shape. Now, let's take a closer look at these entities. We'll talk about two authors in particular. They both deal with these post-human perspectives, and we'll see how these two authors can bring these two different realms, that of the technology and that of humanity, these two separate worlds under the same roof. One can be more ascribed to the hard sciences and the other to the humanities. Well, they bring them under the same roof, adopting the prism or through the prism of the social sciences. And according to the words of Jürgen Habermas, that is the role to be played by the social sciences. The task, sometimes the hard task of creating a dialogue between different fields of knowledge. Now, the first author we want to talk about is called Donna Haraway. She's a philosopher, she's a zoologist, a biologist too. In fact, she has a degree in philosophy, she has a degree in zoology, and has a PhD in biology. So her background shows that she's an intellectual that embodies this domain of knowledge that combines and integrates different viewpoints. In 1985, Donna Haraway published a book. The book was entitled Cyborg Manifesto, and that book became very famous, very important work. And indeed, all her work, it's something centered on the relation between the technology and human beings, and that focuses specifically on gender identity. Therefore, what is truly relevant to Donna Haraway for the life of human beings is how gender identity is reshaped through the link and co-evolution between the technology and human beings. Manifesto Cyborg, well, it's not a very recent book, but it certainly made history. It's very well known, and it's a very important piece of work. The figure of the cyborg, which is the leading actor of her book, is certainly a symbolic figure. It's a figure that she recognizes and uses as a symbol of this co-evolution between the technology and humanity. And this symbol helps her overcome that dualism we mentioned before between technological innovation and human beings, but also the dualism between the human kingdom and the animal kingdom. Indeed, Donna Haraway defines the cyborg as a being, an organism which consists of all the differences that we can find in the world. It consists of people, things, representations, as well as politics. Now, Donna Haraway's stance very much inquires into the political connotations of post-humanism and what are the political effects of post-humanism. An additional point by Donna Haraway about the cyborg and about the cyborg as a symbol, and of course we think of the literature of cinema, of these cyborgs that inhabit science fiction works, these hybrids between machines and human bodies, which move against the background of science fiction scenarios. So why Donna Haraway decided to focus on this symbol, the symbol of the cyborg? Well, she decided to do that to highlight this hybrid humanity which is emerging, overcoming the previous dichotomy. Additionally, and this is very, very important too, she does it to emphasize the role of the body. Indeed, in her view, it is critical to identify and to clarify that in this co-evolution of technology and human beings, the body, a body which is of course made of skin, of bones, of flesh, but also of mechanical pieces. So our body is exposed, is prone to a transformation. And as I was saying, Donna Haraway inquires specifically into the evolution, into the possible changes induced through these hybrids, these co-evolutionary entities of technology and human beings. And the cyborg is the emblem of it. And also she figures out how this impacts on gender identities. And indeed she takes up a political stance. And she acknowledges the possibilities too. So it's a critical stance in both ways. On the one hand, she emphasizes the political, or rather the negative aspects of it. On the other hand, she also outlines new possibilities. She foreshadows new possibilities. Now, in her book about the cyborg, she acknowledges how the technology that holds the promise to liberate human beings from a series of limitations, of constraints. Just think of the development of biotechnologies or medical progress, for example. So she emphasizes that technological development may lead to liberate the deep identities of human beings, while in parallel it continues to reproduce the current modes of power that are based on the supremacy of a certain type of body, a male body. A white male body, and it also reproduces a certain model of economic functioning, which is capitalism. So she points to the co-evolution between the technology and human beings through these hybrids, through the cyborgs, and she leverages on it to call into question, to challenge these forms of power, both personal power, the body, for instance, and the more general ones. So she challenges the model of capitalistic development. So from a technical view of the technology, from a dichotomic view, so one of the leading post-human perspectives in the international debate, which is that by Donna Haraway, so that's a perspective where the rethinking, well, rather than the rethinking of the relation, it's truly thinking the technology and human beings together in the post-human perspective. And so all of that is charged with strong political connotations, highlighting the importance of rethinking some of the foundations of our way of living, based on forms of power and authority that are never challenged, and that perhaps through the emergence and through the transition towards the cyborgs, towards these symbols of change, we can begin to challenge, to call into question. So the technological dimension and the human dimension meet with a strong political charge and focusing on gender identity, going then beyond the impact of the technology on gender identity to call into question the very social model prevailing in the whole world. I'd say 99% of the world, the capitalistic model. Now, what may be the consequences of this view? How can we expand it and consider how this interpretation, using the symbol of the cyborg to challenge the mainstream view, how it can help us think of the relations between the model of economic development and the environmental effects of it. Now, another author would like to refer to an author that can be framed into the same post-human perspective suggests a new thinking versus the dichotomy between technology and humanity towards a rethinking of the relation between the two. So this author also inquires into hybrids, the hybrids that are taking shape. Bruno Latour is a sociologist, an epistemologist. Well, it's always very difficult, of course, to use a label for these important thinkers. So those, the people who define the key subjects in such complex debates, they have the ability and culture, the knowledge to move around and touch on different fields of knowledge. Here you can see the covers of two books of his. The first is called Science in Action, and it was one of his first successful books. Well, that's an inquiry on science, sociology. So he explores the forms of social organization of scientific research and specifically of engineers. So I'm quoting it for this, actually. The other book is more relevant to our subject. It's called Reassembling the Social. It dates back to 2005. However, it's, I would say, a summary of all his thinking that has systematized a number of works carried out by Bruno Latour from the 80s onwards. So what about Bruno Latour's perspective? Well, here again, similar to all post-human perspectives, similar to all the authors making reference to them, he overcomes the dichotomy between technology and human beings. He also inquires about these hybrid entities that are taking shape. And basically, the theory, the most well-known conceptualization by Bruno Latour that may be applied to investigate these topics is what is called the actor network theory. So what about this actor network theory? The world is full of hybrids. Containing both human and non-human entities. Well, and these entities or these souls, let's say, the human one and the non-human one, are so interlaced and so intertwined that they can't be separated. So much so that we must consider them as new entities. And being hybrids with both human and non-human parts, they have an agency. What does it mean to have an agency? It means they have the capacity to act. So what he's saying is that both human beings and non-human beings, they both have an agency. Well, since they consist of human and non-human entities, and since they act in both ways, we can't separate. We can't separate them. And he provides an example to explain these hybrids. He says, what part of the software could be considered just as an inanimate object, and which part could be considered the result of human interaction? And he adds, I cannot draw a distinction between these two parts. Therefore, let's think of them together. Let's consider them as one single identity. And let's also consider that even objects, even non-human entities, have the capacity to act. And how do they act? Well, of course, they act differently. They don't take the same actions as we do. However, the actions that they take is an action anyway, has effects anyway. And let me give you an example that makes reference to my own field of research, i.e., so I'm a geographer, I'm an economic and political geographer, and I focus my attention on the city. So in southern Italy, we can, let's say, can read the urbanization process, which is usually considered the outcome of the actions of human beings, because it's, of course, human beings who may decide to move to the city, to build houses, or to build roads. Well, I'm simplifying it, of course, but basically, that is the outcome of human actions. Well, actually, in this specific municipality of southern Italy, if we look at the way it's changing, well, I would say a big chunk of that municipality, how it is transforming, actually, well, it is transforming not because of the action of human beings, but because of the action of coastal erosion. So because of the action of non-human entities. Of course, if we ask ourselves, where does coastal erosion come from? At that point, this network of human and non-human actors begins to take shape, and indeed he calls it the actor network. Now, how does the actor network theory helps us bring the two souls, the two realms, the technology and humanity under the same roof? How can we reframe our thinking on technology and humanity? According to the actor network theory, according to Bruno Latour, we can study both the technology and human beings using the same tools. And this may sound simple, but it's incredibly revolutionary. You will remember what I said in introducing this lecture. I said that there are different perspectives, different cultures that are traditionally separate. We talked about 2 cultures, then we expanded them to 3: natural sciences, social sciences, and the humanities. According to Bruno Latour and all those who refer to that approach, according to the actor network theory, we are able to define. Then how, of course, is a different, is a completely different thing, and so we do not, do that now. However, the actor network theory is an interpretation frame that helps us explore through the same theories, through the same conceptual frames, so it enables us to explore both the people and the technologies. So not only this interpretation frame points to the presence of hybrids, but the actor network theory provides an interpretation frame to overcome the previous dichotomies and provides the interpretation and theoretical tools to overcome these dichotomies and to study together people, human beings, and technologies. So we can overcome the dichotomy not only from the perspective of the phenomenon itself, but also in terms of our interpretation framework. Bruno Latour carried out a whole set of experiments, of applications of the actor network theory, and indeed it was very successful in various fields of knowledge. So in a way or the other, his proposal, his frame, enabling an exploration, a joint exploration of humanity and the technology, works, or at least seems to work. So the actor network theory is a theoretical framework helping us study how technological objects are built, are developed in society, and therefore they are the outcome of social evolution. However, what is the additional element introduced by Bruno Latour in this interpretation frame? Not only he refers to human beings, he refers to society, to social organization, to a set of relations between human beings. So that's a further step. An additional feature of the actor network theory expressed by Bruno Latour, actually the social dimension, so the forms of social and technological organization, if seen through the prism of the actor network theory, are embedded in each other. So we can't draw any distinction between them. And since we can't draw any distinction, part of the attention paid to the hybrids in all the post-human perspectives, of course that's a focus for all of them, these hybrids of technology and humanity. But as I was saying, he adds an interpretation frame that from the theoretical and methodological viewpoint highlights how the world is made of hybrids and how we should equip ourselves to grasp their role. An active role which is played both by human beings and by the other entities. Well, the actor network perspective is, of course, different from that expressed by Donna Haraway, and that is why I shared with you the perspectives of these two different authors, because they're different, though converging. So what is the main difference between them? Well, there's a political role which is attached to overcoming the dichotomy between technology and humanity with Donna Haraway. Well, at the same time, the key role of the body as a key in understanding and challenging contemporary dynamics. What about Bruno Latour? What is peculiar about his theory? Well, he addresses the subject of hybrids, not just in terms of their identity or identifying hybrids, since he develops a frame to inquire into what we're becoming. And he points to the need for learning to combine both of them together, the technological dimension and the human dimension. Another element in Bruno Latour's actor network theory is that he doesn't talk about human beings, but he refers to society. His book is entitled Reassembling the Social. That means that he addresses the human beings as part of a social organization. So he wants to understand the relation between technology and society, which is not exactly the same thing as the relation between technology and humanity and human beings. Clearly, human society is made of human beings. However, society, social relations add other complexity layers. Therefore, the focus here is society, is the hybrid of human and non-human, and how it redefines the form of social organization, and how the actor network theory can provide a frame to combine, to hold together, also from the methodological and theoretical viewpoint, two worlds considered as separate worlds. Technology and humanity at a time of crisis. Now, this is often neglected. It's often forgotten in thinking about the relation between technology and humanity. It's forgotten as a co-evolutionary link where it's becoming more and more difficult to draw a distinction between what is human and what is technological. However, there's certainly a strong link defining new hybrids. So let's make reference to the current situation. Well, undoubtedly, this can be considered a crisis, and the link between technology and humanity, the co-evolution between the two, underwent an acceleration towards something new. So let's move away from the interpretation frames we considered before for a moment and see how they can help us interpret also the current situation, the current crisis. So in the past 2 years, with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, so the accelerated introduction of new technologies has changed our reality. Well, of course, the technologies were already there, but because in parallel with this crisis, the role of new technologies has become particularly relevant in our lives with a very fast transformation. We just think of the daily use of technologies that are part of our daily life. Yes, or just think of distance learning or working from home or communication technologies from remote, which certainly helped a lot, especially during the lockdown. And think of all the apps we have on our smartphones, well, not just personal leisure apps, but also for tracking infections or social distancing. Well, think of temperature control objects, for instance. They are omnipresent in so many public spaces. And yes, leaving aside these very daily technologies, there are other technologies that continue to play a very important role. For example, medicine, research and testing of vaccines or the treatment of the disease. And let's also consider the technologies used for collecting and processing huge amounts of data related to the pandemic. No, this acceleration has changed our lives, has changed our daily gestures, and undoubtedly has changed our society, has changed the way we live together in the world. Donna Haraway might say we have all become a little bit more cyborgs. Maybe we've moved forward in becoming these post-human cyborgs in transhumanism, and perhaps these hybrids combining human and non-human aspects. What we have become in the past 2 years, Bruno Latour's actor network theory can certainly help us in that. A time of crisis. However, A crisis can also be considered an opportunity to consider that the link between technologies and humanity is not unavoidable. It's something ensuing from decisions and actions. Actions by human beings, but also, as we learn from Bruno Latour, actions by the technology. So if we think about the period of time we are living, and learning to navigate this period of time, learning to think of technology actions and human actions as together can certainly help us understand the new role of humanity and the new role of technology. Now, this book by Gerd Leonard of 2019, Technology and Humanity in Time of Crisis and Opportunity. Now, the last chapter of the book is called The Time of Decisions. And maybe during a crisis, you might consider a crisis a time of decisions because you don't want to waste the opportunity. And that is actually the perspective adopted by OECD, the International Organization for Cooperation and Economic Development. It's an international organization set up in 1960 with, let's say, ensuing from a previous organization set up in the post-war period for reconstruction purposes in European countries. So it was, let's say, set up to manage the Marshall Plan. Then it was turned into the current OECD, which is aimed at promoting economic development and the well-being of the people. So that's the aim of OECD, acting for the well-being of people. So it combines various countries, not just Europe, but it includes Japan, the US, Australia. Of course, it has a number of divisions with specific topics. There's a division on science, technology, and innovation with a periodic review of reports and data to monitor the situation in that field. Now, the division dealing with science, technology, and innovation issued a report called Time of Crisis and Opportunity in 2021. So OECD Science, Technology and Innovation, Times of Crisis and Opportunity. Now, the acceleration induced by the COVID-19 pandemic opened up new ways to think and rethink the link between technology and humanity, to act within it and to move away from the entrenched positions that we mentioned before. So what is the main content that we'd like to recall about this report by OECD? Because it actually points to an agency ascribed to the link between technology and humanity. Now, basically, what the report says, and as we recalled before, the technologies, and specifically the digital technologies, played a key role in managing the pandemic, in ensuring people's well-being also during the pandemic. At the same time, what we get from this report is that we can do more. We can improve the situation. We can take action to make sure that the link between technology and humanity moves towards the creation of greater well-being for the people. So the key message of this document is this: let's leverage the pandemic as a turning point for science, for technology, for innovation, as well as for a rethinking of the relation between technology and humanity. Every crisis points to the existing challenges, so let us not waste this opportunity. That's the key message of the report. Now, what are the tools we can use, or where can we take action? We can make decisions, knowing that we are in a realm characterized by human actions, by technological actions, and there's constant interaction, there's constant feedback between these realms, which create an inextricable whole. Well, there's a point of caution here, because rethinking, redefining, acting in this link, new, let's say, domain, means acting globally. It means knowing that this redefinition of relations between technology and humanity, the development of this post-human hybrid that we can become, enhancing the positive aspects of the technology and the positive aspects of humanity, is not confined to national borders. It's also important to acknowledge differences worldwide in the perception of advantages and disadvantages of the technology. And what does it mean? Well, it means that we are operating in a collaborative framework at an international level. It may sound simple, but as a matter of fact, the technologies and the link with human beings is also part of that complex set of international relations that are constantly challenged by the global balance of power. So the first lesson we can draw from the pandemic vis-à-vis this link, well, there is certainly the relevance in international cooperation. But then OECD identifies a range of technological developments that during the pandemic very clearly defined the link between technology and humanity. What are we talking about? Well, these are fields where technological development interacts with the human sphere in different realms. One of them is that of the Internet of Things, and here you can see the role of the Internet of Things during the crisis. And this role can be further extended to detect a number of outstanding issues in human development processes, which require action, from risk management to the simpler, let's say, management of our homes, to health management, etc., etc. So a whole set of domains in human life that can now interact through the Internet of Things. Another important key domain for, according to this report, is robotics. And once again, moving from the role played by robots in the management of the pandemic, we can see the potential, we can see the further potential for setting up new relations between technology and humanity in so many different fields. Now, one last example provided by the OECD report is about telemedicine. And the emphasis here is not really about a technology, but rather the integration of different technologies. Well, clearly, telemedicine it becomes key at a time of health crisis, but there's a further element here that we want to underscore. The role of an integration of technologies may be particularly crucial in redefining the link between technology and humanity at a time when, as happens in so many countries in the world, we are witnessing a gradual aging of the population. Well, this is happening in Turin, in Italy, in other regions of the world too. Just think about Japan. So how can the elderly population and these new demographic trends redefines the link with the technology to, of course, pursue the well-being of people? Well, clearly, this report by the OECD takes up a very positive attitude and moves from the assumption that there is room for action, that there is an agency for both technology and humanity. Of course, we know that things are more complicated and that there are still a number of outstanding issues, of question marks, of aspects deserving more attention, to think about the choices that we need to make, to take, to really combine technology and humanity. And there's, of course, a big question mark about the evolution of the pandemic. Is it coming to an end, or we'll learn how to coexist with it? And there are pending uncertainties over and above the pandemic. For example, one of these uncertainties is about the preferences and social values vis-à-vis the technologies. How to raise technological awareness, how to raise critical awareness about the link between technology and humanity. Some other uncertainties are related to the socio-economic aspects of the development of technologies and, well, redefining this link. So as I said before, there's the big question mark of international relations. As I hinted at before, this is one of the key messages of the pandemic, and as the OECD explains, and therefore we need to act on this element. However, at the same time, we know how the field of international relations is a complex one, is a conflicting one, where let's say the possible actions often clash with powers and interests that are not always in line with the goals of this report. So let's recap the indications, the insights that we get from the OECD reports and the insights coming from the current situation. How the current situation has prompted the need for an in-depth inquiry, a constructive, serious inquiry on this co-evolution between technologies and humanity. So we can certainly gain some insights. We can certainly ask questions, raise questions. Undoubtedly, the key insight is that these past 2 years put in the forefront the need to think and rethink the link between technology and humanity, overcoming the dichotomy, overcoming negative or all positive attitudes. Since what is emerging from the current situation is that the technology is increasingly confronted with very complex social challenges. Well, a pandemic is by definition a complex social challenge, a global challenge. That's another key element. Another complex social challenge that the technology and humanity need to grapple with is that of climate change, another global challenge. Now, to acknowledge the complex global challenges we're witnessing, we need to overcome previous dichotomies and even the attitude of those who say, well, I don't like the technology, but we are the technology. And as Bruno Latour says in his book published in 1995, our societies are symbolically and also materially based on objects made in the lab, i.e., on technologies. To what extent these being symbolically and materially based on the technology, our societies are symbolically and materially based on the technology, well, this has become very visible at this time of crisis. So how can we address it? How can we leverage the positive aspects related to the presence of technology in our societies where symbolic and social practices require their technology? Our relations are based on the technology. Let's also consider that individual human beings are not prone, not supine to the technologies. They contribute to define their use and characteristics. So there is room for action, room for individual and social action. There is an agency by both individuals and by society. And this agency pertains to technologies too. And that is the element which mediates and builds our relations. The technologies are hybrids too. Human beings are hybrids, and the technologies are hybrids too. And with a view to the shaping up of this post-human future, which needs to be built through actions and decisions, well, thinking in terms of what type of human being and what types of society has experienced these past 2 years of pandemic, where the link between technology and humanity has become closer and closer and has increasingly defined and informed our lives and our life possibilities. I would like to stop here with my lecture. I thank you very much. I'm, of course, at your disposal for any possible questions and clarifications, and to begin with you a critical discussion around the issues about the link between technology and humanity. Thank you.